Dennis Rodman, the worm, wouldn't wiggle here. Dennis Rodman is an icon. A rebound-snagging, hair-dyeing, Vegas partying, North Korea visiting icon. And yes, in the 90s, he was a defensive terror, a master of positioning, and a Hall of Fame-level disruptor of rhythm, ankles, and locker rooms alike. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If you airdropped Dennis into today's NBA, he's unplayable by the second quarter. Let's start with the obvious. Spacing. Rodman couldn't shoot. Not just bad at shooting, he literally refused to shoot. The man once averaged 0.7 points per game while playing 30 minutes a night. That's not low usage. That's a protest against defense. In 2025, your bigs need to stretch the floor or pass like Jokic, Rodman. He couldn't hit a corner three if you gave him a Nerf ball and a stepladder. And on defense, sure, he could guard 1 through 5 in 1996, but you think he's switching onto Steph Curry now, or keeping up with Tyrese Halliburton, sprinting through 15 off-ball screens. Please, he'd look like someone's hungover uncle trying to keep up in a Zumba class. And don't even get me started on modern officiating. Rodman fouled like it was a competitive hobby. In today's NBA, he'd foul out by halftime, then spend the third quarter arguing with Adam Silver on Twitter. But Rodman would bring toughness. Sure, and so would a bouncer at a nightclub. But toughness without offense, spacing, or adaptability gets you a 10-day contract in today's league, if you're lucky. Rodman's whole shtick was that he didn't care about scoring. That was charming when your team had MJ and Pippen. In 2025, if you're a non-shooter, non-scorer, non-passer, you better be 7 feet 4 inches and French. And what about his antics? The Vegas trips? The mid-season wrestling matches? The wardrobe choices? Honestly, that part might actually work better today. The NBA is basically a reality show now. But reality TV doesn't get you buckets. In today's game, Rodman would be a celebrity, but not a star. He'd have a killer Instagram, a Netflix documentary, and maybe even a podcast with Draymond Green. But on the court, he's getting ghosted by every coach in the league. Rodman's heart, hustle, and madness made him legendary in a league that allowed for it. But in today's NBA, the worm gets squashed. John Stockton, elite passer, defensive liability. John Stockton is the NBA's all-time leader in assists and steals. That stat alone gives old heads enough ammunition to yell, underrated, in every barbershop debate, from Salt Lake City to Mars. But if we're being honest, and we always are here, Stockton in 2025 wouldn't be setting assist records. He'd be setting go-for-nims to stay in the league. Let's break it down. Stockton was 6', built like a 7th grade PE teacher, and moved like he was constantly trying to find parkingshire. He was crafty, smart, and could deliver a bounce. Pass like Picasso with a paintbrush, but in today's NBA, that isn't enough. You can't hide defensively anymore, not with every team hunting switches like it's Black Friday. Ja Morant, De'Aaron Fox, and even your random backup combo guard would eat Stockton alive on every switch. They'd ISO him out, force the screen, and blow past him like he was a training cone. The man was tough, yes, but this isn't about toughness. It's about lateral quickness, shot creation, and defensive versatility, and Stockton ranks DNP in all of them. Offensively, he was pass first, because he had no second option. He couldn't shoot off the dribble, wasn't a threat in transition, and had zero vertical game. In a league where even centers are pulling up from 3, Stockton would be an analytics red flag. And if you're imagining him dishing to modern shooters, picture this. He passes to Lauri Markkanen on the pick and pop, and immediately gets cooked on the other end by Anthony Edwards. Rinse, repeat. Bench.today. He'd be a serviceable backup, maybe running second units in Indiana. Best case scenario, TJ McConnell with better PR. Worst case, G League coach. Bob Cousy, the original mismatch. Look, Bob Cousy deserves respect. The guy helped pioneer modern basketball. But when people start comparing him to today's guards, it's like comparing a horse-drawn carriage to a Tesla Plaid. Cousy played in a time when the average NBA athlete looked like your tax accountant. And even then, his dribbling was stiff, his left hand barely functional, and his shooting mechanics looked like he was aiming at a spider on the rim. Cousy was flashy for his time. Now, he looked like a dad trying to keep up with his son's AAU team. He didn't shoot threes. He couldn't finish through contact. He played below the rim, under the rim, and at times beneath the floorboards. Defensively, he'd be unplayable. He wouldn't survive a single switch against anyone under 30 years old. And offensively, once defenders realized he couldn't shoot or break down a set defense, he'd be left on an island alone, confused, and surrounded by defenders who can leap over him. In today's NBA, Bob Cousy would be a nice trivia answer, a Celtics history segment. and nothing else. Rick Barry, great shooter, terrible teammate. And today's problem, Rick Barry had one of the purest shooting strokes of his era, a high basketball IQ, and a mean, underhand free throw that still makes shooting coaches whisper respect. But in today's NBA, he'd struggled not just because of how he played, but because of how he behaved. Let's start with the skill set. Barry was a volume scorer who loved mid-range shots, rarely passed unless absolutely necessary, and wasn't exactly a willing defender. He played in an era without a three-point line, so while we can assume he might have adapted, it's still a huge leap from hitting flat jumpers in 1975 to confidently pulling up from 30 feet. Like Dame, he wasn't athletic by today's standards. His first step wouldn't scare Kyle Anderson. His handle, functional. His defense, passive-aggressive at best. And if you put him in a modern switch-heavy defensive scheme, his lack of lateral mobility would get him turned into an NBA meme by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on a nightly basis. But Barry's real weakness in today's league, his personality. Teammates hated playing with him. Coaches didn't trust him. He once admitted his own teammates didn't invite him to their team reunion. He had a superiority complex that made Jordan look like a guidance counselor. Today, that kind of ego doesn't fly unless you're carrying your team deep into the playoffs, and even then, guys like Kyrie get side eyes. Barry, he'd be that dude taking 20 shots a night while yelling at his rookie center for not boxing out. By game 10, he's on the bench with a hamstring strain and a private meeting with the GM. Could he have adapted to today's pace and space game? Maybe, but his scoring style was more old-school post-ups and off-balance runners than motion-based, read-and-react defense. And unless he completely reinvented his game and his personality, he wouldn't get a max deal. He'd get traded, benched, or podcasted into retirement. Bill Walton, mind of a genius. Knees of a joke. Bill Walton is one of those NBA figures who defies simple categorization. As a player, he was brilliant, an elite passer from the center position, tremendous basketball IQ, a natural leader with a hippie soul and a boombox voice. But in today's NBA, the league of 82 games, constant switching, and hyper-athleticism, Walton's career would barely get off the ground. Let's be real, Walton's peak was spectacular but criminally brief. He played fully healthy for about 2 seasons, and even then, his game was built around post touches, high-low passing, and stationary rim protection. That style doesn't translate easily into 2025 basketball, where every center is expected to run the floor like a gazelle, shoot at least a mid-range jumper, and switch onto guards without falling over. Walton was smart, but he was slow. He wasn't explosive. He didn't stretch the floor. His postgame, while elegant, would get doubled every time because no one's respecting him from beyond 8 feet, and don't even start on his knees. The guy's injury history reads like a Greek tragedy: stress fractures, multiple foot surgeries, and bone breakdowns that make Greg Oden look durable. In today's game, load management wouldn't save Walton. It would just delay the inevitable that no modern team is building around a 7-footer who needs a day off every 3 days and can't guard a pick and roll to save his life. Off the court, though, Walton would thrive. He'd be the NBA's most viral color commentator, drop weekly spiritual TikToks, host a podcast titled The Wooden Path, and possibly run a kombucha brand with Pau Gasol. But on the hardwood, he'd be your favorite injured DNP. Elvin Hayes, volume scorer in a league that hates volume. Elvin Hayes was a stat sheet monster, a walking 20 and 10, a known-sense big who played over 1,300 games and still had time to complain about not being appreciated enough. But let's not sugarcoat it. If Hayes played in today's NBA, he'd be trending every night for the wrong reasons. First off, Hayes was the king of the inefficient 2-point jumper. Long twos were his bread and butter, and not the cool Kevin Durant fadeaways. We're talking about jab-step face-up, 18-foot bricks with 2 defenders draped over him while a wide-open teammate claps in the corner. He shot under 45% for his career, and that was before defenses stretched the floor and switched like maniacs. Today's analytics departments would collectively break out in hives watching his shot chart. Defensively, he was solid in the paint, sure, but put him in a modern system and ask him to hedge a pick and roll. He'd move like someone buffering on bad Wi-Fi. Hayes wasn't laterally quick, wasn't a rim-running big, and definitely wasn't switching onto anyone under 6'6" without giving up an immediate bucket. He was also known for being ... difficult. Teammates and coaches often called him out for not being a team guy. You'd think he'd survive in a league where locker room chemistry is treated like sacred scripture, where your PR team is almost as important as your jumper. No chance. Imagine Hayes in 2025 refusing to shoot threes, refusing to pass, demanding post-ups, and complaining to the media after shooting 7 for 23 in a loss to the Pistons. He'd be Julius Randle on steroids without the smiles or the Instagram reels. He bulks down, learns to roll hard, and becomes a slightly disgruntled version of Al Horford. Worst case, he's waived mid-season, while ESPN analysts ask, did Elvin ever really fit today's game? George Mikan, dominator of male and milk, Mgin, was a pioneer, the first true big man, a dominant post presence who forced the league to widen the lane because no one could stop him. But let's be very, very clear that dominance came against dudes who looked like part-time barbers. Mikan played in an era where the average height was 6 floor. Players chain-smoked during halftime, and the only weight room anyone saw was the one at the YMCA next to the racquetball courts. His famous hook shots and stiff footwork were revolutionary. In 1949, put him in the NBA now, and he'd get bodied by 6 feet 10 inches wings, who also shoot 40% from 3 and can jump over traffic cones. He wasn't athletic. He couldn't stretch the floor. He couldn't guard in space. Asking Mikan to guard Bam Adebayo or Jaren Jackson Jr. is like asking a refrigerator to catch a cheetah. It's cruel. It's unfair. It's realistic. Imagine a switch. Luka Doncic gets Mikan on the perimeter. Luka smiles, crosses over once, then step backs into a 3 as George turns like the Titanic. Ball in, crowd gasps. Mikan sighs and wonders why he left his law practice. And look, we're not disrespecting his legacy. Without Mikan, the NBA might not even exist. But if you throw him into today's league without a full bionic rebuild and a personal trainer from Wakanda, he's toast. Historical toast, but toast nonetheless. Dave DeBusschere, grit over glamour, but lacking game. Dave DeBusschere was a New York legend. Tough, dependable, a glue guy before that term even existed. But let's not pretend toughness alone buys you a contract in 2025. If it did, half of the Knicks fan base would be on a 10-day deal. Right now, Dave was a terrific defender and a great rebounder for his size. But his offensive game was prehistoric. He couldn't stretch the floor, wasn't a shot creator, and mostly operated in the mid-range or off-hustle plays. In a league that lives and dies by spacing and versatility, DeBusschere would be a roster. Challenge, he was 6 feet 6 inches, playing power forward, good luck with that, against Giannis, Zion, or even guys like Michael Porter Jr. Sure, he'd fight, box out, dive for loose balls, and then get cooked in the next possession by a pick-and-pop 3 he couldn't contest, and he wasn't an elite passer either. The modern NBA expects every forward to either be a floor general or a sniper. DeBusschere, he was neither. The sad truth is, he'd have to evolve into a PJ Tucker-type player just to stay on the court, but PJ has corner 3s. Dave didn't. That means he'd be sweating for 12 minutes a night just to avoid being replaced by a two-way contract guy named Tyrese with blue hair and a 42-inch vertical. Mark Eaton, the shot-blocking statue. Mark Eaton was a mountain, a 7 feet 4 inches shot-blocking specialist who made opponents think twice before entering the paint. He swatted shots like it was his part-time job band. It basically was. But in 2025, he'd be chased off the floor faster than you can say drop coverage. Eaton couldn't move. That's not a joke. His mobility was so limited that he made Rudy Gobert look like Allen Iverson. The man had a defensive impact in the 80s. When games were played in slow motion and offensive spacing meant, don't stand on top of your teammate. Put Eaton in a modern pick-and-roll, and he's lost. Steph Curry would get a screen. See? Eaton sagging back 5 feet and pull up without a second thought. The Jazz would be minus 25 before Quinn Snyder even finishes yelling ice the screen. He couldn't shoot. At all. Not even a little. So now you've got a 7 feet 4 guy who can't space the floor, can't switch, and can't finish lobs because he's slower than molasses in January. Tell me what coach is drawing up plays for that. At best, Eaton would get the Boban treatment. Beloved, funny, and used sparingly in matchups where someone like Steven Adams is on the floor. At worst, he's a YouTube short titled, Why 7-Footers Don't Work Anymore. Charles Oakley, intimidation doesn't work on Twitter. Charles Oakley was a menace, a hitman in sneakers. He protected MJ like a mafia bodyguard and enforced the paint like it was his turf. But Oakley's game, it was built on fear and fists, not finesse or footwork. In today's NBA, intimidation doesn't get you far. Not when 19-year-olds are putting up triple-doubles and tweeting memes about you afterward. Oakley was a non-shooter, a mediocre finisher, and a guy who couldn't switch onto quicker players without throwing an elbow. And trust me, you throw that elbow today, you're getting fined, suspended, ratioed on X, and dropped from your G-League affiliate. Offensively, Oakley was a 0 unless it involved rebounding, a miss, and going back up strong. He wasn't a playmaker, didn't run the floor, and couldn't shoot threes. You'd have to explain to him why he's standing in the corner on offense, and then again, why he's supposed to defend Luka one-on-one in space. Defensively, sure, he was strong, but strength alone doesn't guard pick and rolls anymore. Unless Oakley magically develops lateral quickness and a jumper. He's spending more time on podcasts than in playoff rotations. We still love the legend, but in today's NBA, Oakley is Kendrick Perkins without the TNT contract. Tough, loud, and out of sync with the modern game. Wilt Chamberlain, the GOAT of stat padding. Let's get this out of the way first. Wilt Chamberlain was a freak of nature, a unicorn, before anyone knew what that meant. He once scored 100 points in a game, averaged 54 an entire season, and probably benched your car for fun. But here's the harsh reality. Wilt wouldn't dominate today's NBA like he did in his era. In fact, he might not even be a consistent all-star. Why? Because today's NBA is about skill, spacing, and speed. Three things Wilt didn't really need to master back then. He towered over defenders who looked like gym teachers and faced competition that included part-time accountants and postmen. The average center in his day, around 6'8", 220 pounds. Today, try 7 feet with a 7 feet 6 inches wingspan, a 40-inch vertical, and a step-back 3. Wilt never had to shoot outside 10 feet. His free throws were borderline criminal career, 51%, and his post-game, while devastating in the 60s, would get swarmed by modern help defense, analytics-driven double teams, and rim protectors who've been studying tape since And let's talk defense. Sure, Wilt blocked a lot of shots allegedly, since blocks weren't even recorded back then, but could he really guard a 5-out offense? Imagine him getting switched on to Ja Morant, one jab step, and Wilt's looking for his Converse. Also, the pace of the modern game would crush him. Today's NBA has teams flying up and down the court with positionless lineups and 35 three-point attempts per night. Wilt hated running back on defense, even when he was 25. Imagine him trying to survive a Warriors versus Kings game. His lungs would file for retirement. And then there's the locker room factor. Wilt was obsessed with stats. He once admitted to choosing not to foul out of games, even if it meant losing, just to protect his personal record. That kind of mindset. In 2025, he'd get roasted on every podcast, Reddit thread, and ESPN segment within hours. Don't get it twisted, Wilt was a legend, a pioneer, and one of the greatest athletes ever. But in today's league, unless he completely reinvented his game and his ego, he wouldn't average 30 and 20. He might not even average 20 and 10. He'd be DeAndre Ayton with better PR. So there you have it. 11 legends, 11 giants of the game, all of them iconic in their own right, and all of them likely to get cooked, benched, or canceled in today's NBA. Let me know below comments which video you would love to see next. Here now, before you flood the comments section with, "Bro, you don't respect the old guard." Relax. No one's saying these players weren't great in their time. But let's be honest, dropping 40 on a dude who smoked 2 packs at halftime is not the same as getting a bucket on Draymond while Steph is launching nukes from 35 feet. The game changed. It evolved. It got faster, smarter, meaner, and more brutal just without the elbows. Today's NBA is a different beast, and some of these old-school legends, they'd be lions trying to hunt in a shark tank. And yeah, we know, if they had today's training in nutrition and analytics, sure, maybe, but then again, if Kendrick Perkins had Hakeem's footwork and Jokic's IQ, he'd be MVP too. That's not how this works. What makes a player great isn't just dominance, it's adaptability. And the cold truth, some of the guys we worship from black and white footage were perfectly built for their era, but would be exposed in 4,000 today. But don't worry, we're fair around here. If this episode was about who wouldn't survive today's NBA, then the next it's gonna be about those old school killers who would absolutely torch today's league, because some legends, they were ahead of their time. Larry, Magic, Hakeem, we see you so. If you're still foaming at the mouth from hearing me roast Wilt, or watching Bob Cousy get PTSD from the thought of guarding Tyrese Maxey, hit that like, drop a comment, and make sure to subscribe, because we're not done with NBA blasphemy just yet. It's gonna be about those old school killers who would absolutely torch today's league, because some legends, they were ahead of their time. Larry, Magic, Hakeem, we see you so. If you're still foaming at the mouth from hearing me roast Wilt, or watching Bob Cousy get PTSD from the thought of guarding Tyrese Maxey, hit that like, drop a comment, and make sure to subscribe, because we're not done with NBA blasphemy just yet.